This video has been 2 years in the making, and I've looked at how do you develop an increased trunk line on the Korean hornbeam. This is of course replicable to other species, but in this case I'm looking at a Korean hornbeam. Now 2 years ago I didn't know exactly what I was going to do with this tree. I was really thinking about tossing it, and I took it out of the pot and I repotted it and I started styling it, and then I just let it grow. Well, enough about what I did 2 years ago. Let's not talk about it, let's look at it. Let's go back 2 years in time. And this is the Korean hornbeam. Now this is known to grow quite well. This is growth of last year. It grows at nice angles, so if you cut it, all the branches come out at nice little angles. And I use that to my advantage on this tree. I've had this one for I think 4 years now, and when I got it, the tree was about this tall. This was about that wide. And everything else has grown since. Last year I have just let it grow, and as a result I have a lot of long branches, which is nice because I want the trunk to fatten. I want the top to get taller. But what I've also seen is there's a lot of dead twigs in there. So I'm going to take all the dead twigs out. Then I'm going to wire all these young branches. It is now very early spring. Slowly the hornbeams are starting to wake up. So I can now, look at this, I can now make quite tight bends. So I'm going to wire all these long branches out, prune it back into sort of a profile. The top needs sorting out because this really is not the direction that I wanted to take. A lot of the branches in this tree have died off over summer because they were shaded out by the long lush growth that this tree was showing. As a result, I now have a lot of pruning to do. Also removing branches that are growing into the canopy because I am not going to use those. It is a little bit difficult to see this time of the year what is all alive and what's not. As I'm going to do a lot of wiring, I am going to be pruning off a lot, and maybe too much. Now I know it might feel a little bit awkward that I'm cutting all these little branch nubbins and stubs out of here, and it looks like a lot of the inner branches is gone, and that is true. A lot of the inner branching is gone. And is that a problem, you could say? No, this is not a problem, because this stage of development, actually this tree doesn't need all these inner branches and all the refinement, because I am growing it still out to get a thicker trunk. In fact, I should put it in a bigger pot so it can grow faster, but I'm doing it in a slow way. So all these long branches mean that I'm going to lose inner branches, and it's not a problem because at some point I'm going to bring everything back in and it will back bud, and then I'm building the refinement. So this is something to keep in mind. If you're growing out a tree, normally you focus on thickening the trunk, setting the branches, and the fine branching will come later. Here, this little thing, well, actually it comes off, it's dead. This was sitting here, big branch here, big branch here, big branch here, big branch here. This is all shaded. This would have died. Well, actually this died. That's natural. It is part of growing it out. It was more refined when I bought it, and I thought it was too small. I wanted a bigger trunk. So I'm now sacrificing the young inner branches for a bigger trunk. So let's look at the top. As said, this is quite long. This is all very straight. So there's a lot of big curves and big bends in this plant, right? Now if I look, this is probably going to be the front of the tree. Then I don't want this all to be straight. I could take either this one as a continuation of the trunk, or I could take this one as a continuation, or I could take this one as a continuation. Let's go back to this one. There's not a lot of side branches. There's not a lot of extra taper, so this doesn't help all that much. Now if I go back one further, here I could make a nice curve. I have a side branch and I could bring this up. If I were to go back all the way here, there's no side branch. This one doesn't have all that many side branches. I'm going to go with this one. I'm going to bring this one up a little bit, wire it out, cut this a little bit better, but not all that much. It needs to have a little stop, otherwise it will break. And I'm going to just wire it like this. So I always like to use one wire and wire multiple branches with it. So this one goes around the little branch here. Then it is going to come up around the trunk. It's not going to do anything for the trunk. and then it gets here to the new top branch that I'm going to wire out as well. And now I can just put it in position as I like, and I'm not paying a lot of attention to the exact shape because this tree is crazy and I want it to remain crazy. So lots of tight little bends just to give it a shape. This part of the tree is pretty much wired out. This side I still need to do, but it's getting really cold in here, so I am going to quit for the day. I'm going to cut off some of the longer branches in the top so that they don't get overly heavy. As you can tell, this one has now also been positioned as a potential front because I'm not sure I like this branch. I might decide later on to cut this off all the way here and continue with this one, creating nice taper and nice movement. I am going to wire this out another time when it's not so cold, but this is the direction I'm taking it. You have to go and move, wait a little bit, move further. That way you can make these tight bends. Don't put them in one go, but slowly, over maybe half a minute, you put ever tighter curves in these branches. That's when you get these nice little tight bends in all these branches. Ready for right now. And once this is wired, it's going to go into a shed. It's going to be frost free, because if they now get frozen, that's not a good idea. Right, it's the end of July and the branches are starting to fatten up so much that the wire needs to come off. Unfortunately, here a little branch has died. But for the rest it is doing okay. You can see, as usual, the top has grown a lot more than the bottom. All my branches have set. So effectively I can do two things. I can just remove all the wire and probably I'll get more branch thickening on the tree, or I can say I'm going to reduce them. Now what I'm going to do is somewhere in the middle. So there's these long branches here in the top, and I don't actually want very fat branches in the top, so I'm just going to clip those back a little bit, right? Here the same. This is the top extension. I want that to fatten up. And then as I get lower here, there's another one that I don't really want to fatten up, so I'm just going to trim it back. But these lower ones I'm all going to leave alone. This one is way up top and I just want a minimal extension. Here a minimal extension, thinning out this whole tree. Of course, what I now hope for is that this will result in a last explosion of growth, as it were, so that I have young branches again to wire out later on. I am slightly concerned that the wire is already biting in too much, but we'll see. And actually it's not the wire biting in, the branch has expanded so much that it is being constricted by its own growth. Let's see what happens if I take the wire off here. You can see the sun has actually bleached the paint off this cheap wire. Next time I'm going to go and buy Japanese wire rather than some cheap mock-off. So there's a little bit of pressure points in the trunk. I hope that this will still grow out next year. But yeah, I am a few weeks late. I should have removed it earlier. Time has flown by and we are now in March, a year after the initial recording of this video. This has grown quite well over summer. The pruning that I did here at the long extensions did not really result in a big push of growth, but I have a few small side branches here. I am quite happy. Now for the next growing season, I am not sure what I'm going to do. I still want this trunk to fatten up. The moss is really taking over, but it is fine. I think it can stay in the pot for another year without dealing with the moss. So I'm just going to prune back a few of these extensions. Not too much, because I still want to develop a lot of taper. Now here the chop I made last year is not so clean. So let me just shorten this stub a little bit more, so that transition becomes a little bit smoother. I'm not too worried about dieback here. Well, I don't want any competing branches going up. This needs movement and not just extension. Another one coming up. And this is really here the work that I'm doing in the top only. The lower branches I'm just going to leave alone. But in the top I'm really not after heavy branching. Here it is important, these buds here are swollen, but here there is no healthy buds. Yet I am going to take the risk, I'm just going to shorten it. This is actually a healthy bud. Because also here I don't want long straight branches, right? So I will have to prune it a little bit here and there. So a nice natural curved line in here. But this coming down is really not of help. Growing back into the tree is not of help. And doesn't need to be all that long. This is a very nice example of where I can create taper. This branch extended last year. And I wired it out as a bit of a sacrifice. Here is a nice side branch and here's a nice side branch. And now I can just clip this back to this first branch, which will now become the extension of this side branch, removing this whole section. And therefore here I've created taper with a nice natural extension. This way I can thin out, make sure this branch doesn't get too heavy because it is fairly high up, but remain this natural movement in the tree. Similarly, this branch is quite heavy for being so high in the top, but there's a nice little side branch here and I can prune back all the way here. I'm losing a big part of the branch, but I do get nice taper and movement in these branches. Here in the back there's another one that is getting quite thick and it has a nice side branch there. Let me twist this around. A bit awkward to see maybe looking down. This is the main trunk line. This is the branch that I just shortened here at this point. Then I have this branch and these come from the same point. And this competes with this side branch here. Yet this can grow. Now if I take my pruners and I take it off here, you don't really notice it later on in the tree. This opens up. I've had my thickening of this trunk and now I can just prune these back as well, and then later in the year they'll start growing again. Now as mentioned before, this tree really is very much still in development. I want the trunk to get thicker. The best way to do this is to plant it in a very big container or in the ground and just let it explode with growth. But for this one I want to avoid bigger cut marks. So every single year I prune it back and sometimes I wire it out. In this case I'm just going to give these lower branches another year to extend. They might then reach this dimension. The top, as you can see, I have pruned back considerably. I want this part to thicken a lot. This branch probably eventually will be my continuation of the trunk line, or even this small one here. But for now this is it. I am going to just put it back in the garden, wait for spring and let it grow. Not going to do much more except for fertilize, water and yeah, let it do its thing. Well, quick summer update. It has picked up. It's still not a very nice warm summer. It's been very wet and very cold. But you now see that I am starting to get some extension growth here in the top. And this top branch is starting to swell up. That's a really good sign because that's what I'm after, right? I want to build this tree up into a bigger tree. Slowly the pot is starting to get too small for this tree. I'm not going to do anything about it at this time. I'm also not going to prune. Pruning now would actually take away a lot of the effort. I now have the long extension growth, and over the rest of summer, we are now middle of July, over the rest of summer what you'll see is that the tree is building upon all this infrastructure that it has created. You have all these solar panels, they are capturing the sunlight, that results in sugars being produced. On the one hand that leads to extension growth, but as these branches get longer, the tree is going to invest in the trunk line. If we now look at this main trunk line and the thin extension that we wired out earlier, this has now really become a part of the main trunk line. And actually here is an old pruning scar. You can take the pruning paste off, cut paste off, and you actually don't see it at all anymore. So this is really how slowly over time you can develop a trunk line. So now I'm just going to let this go for the rest of the year. There's still a lot of openness here, so I'm not too concerned. I can still quite easily prune all of this back without any major problems. So this can just continue doing what it's doing right now. And only in winter I'm going to do a cut back. So there's multiple ways to develop a trunk line for bonsai. And one of the ways to go is in a sort of a clip and grow method. That's what I'm doing here. Even though I'm not clipping every year, I'm clipping every few years. But I realized that the way that I'm going about this here takes a long time, and it also creates only very gentle taper. There are other ways of creating a fat trunk much faster. If you don't know these ways, you might want to look at my most watched video, that one. There I explain the different routes. Well, it's November. Look at that. Finally the tree has started to really grow, but mostly here on top. Now thickness has happened. Here you see this branch has really aided in thickening this base, but all these lower branches are still quite slender, which is okay. I'm going to prune all of them back, and then I need to decide what I'm doing with this top. And what I'm actually thinking about doing, these don't root all that well from cutting. Seeds are hard to get, but air layering seems to be possible. So I might actually propagate this tree because it does create very nice colored fall leaves. Now I have here little seed. Don't know whether there's actually seeds in there. But these are old flower buds. No, these were not fertilized. There's no seeds in there, too bad. Anyway, so what I'm thinking about air layering this top off. And then I'm going to look down at the trunk line and say, well, where does the taper stop? Basically, this is a point where not much taper happens anymore, but that gets really short tree again. I don't want that. I could go all the way to here, but then the tree gets really tall. So somewhere between these 2 points I think is a place to cut off later on. And I'm actually thinking about using this as my new top, this little branch, because you have nice movement here. Then this comes back to the front. It has a nice little side branch, and this can come up as a new top. Now where would I then air layer? I would normally air layer in this area, and that would give me indeed, if I air layer here, a trunk line with lots and lots of movement. So what I can do now is decide, well, first of all, if this is going to be my new top, then this frontal branch is in the way. This side branch is in the way. And here I want to reduce it a little bit as well, so that I have a clear working space later on for the layer. Actually, I'm going to leave this a little bit. Let's remove this long whip. Let's reduce this long whip. So I'm now just pruning these back a little bit, because I don't want it to be such a big tree anymore. But I still want to keep enough power up here to drive the layering process in spring. Right. So now this is a lot clearer, right? This I can of course try to wire up a little bit and also give movement. But I can also say, no, this is my continuation, so I'm going to wire this up, and later on I'm just going to cut this off, which is indeed what I'll do. Now, a little bit of a 1.5 mil aluminium. Really don't overthink this part of the process, because there is still a lot of growing to be done for this tree. And the exact styling later on is not all that important. This is setting the new leader towards development. Right, so now I've got a new leader, I've pruned this back, now I can start looking at this. This is going to be my future main trunk, right? That means that everything else here needs to be pruned back. And once again, I don't really want to overthink this. This is very long. This is very long. Remove lots of the length that was grown over the last few years. I'm not going to wait another 2 seasons to show you this video. I'll do a follow-up maybe later on in a few years of the layering, the propagation. But this is pretty much done. But I can now quickly bring it into shape, and then later on I'll wire it out. This I don't want to keep all that long. This I'll leave in place. I can wire it out. Here these long whips can go, just like that. Now most of these branches are back to the length that I want them, and now it can just go into the garden. Oh, that was dead. Oh, so I'm sorry. You see some of the branches grow around and don't want them to grow around. You can just prune them off or wire them out. Now I've put a little marker here And the marker aids in me remembering in spring that I was going to do something, and in this case I look at the tree and I realize, okay, this is the top of the tree, this is where I was going to air layer. Of course the marker should stay in place. I have pruned everything back. I've not wired it. And why haven't I wired? Well, we are in November. It can start freezing quite soon. And the more you bend these branches in fall, particularly on hornbeam, the easier they die off. So I don't want to run that risk. But by pruning it now, I aid the tree in triggering the internal buds. All the terminal buds have now been removed. The long branches with long, young, viable buds have been removed, and therefore inner buds are now activated over the course of winter, and in spring, as it starts pushing, these buds will swell. Next to this, now in spring I don't need to prune back, so I reduce the risk of losing a lot of water and sap, yet I can wire it out as soon as I see the buds swelling, because then the branches are becoming more flexible again. Now I just have to cover up the substrate again. At some point I need to treat again against moss, and then put this back into the garden for the rest of winter. And with that, we're done with this video. I hope you enjoyed this video on developing a Korean hornbeam and also how slow these are to really fatten up, and wish you a great winter. See you next time. This was Jelle, growing bonsai.